Welcome to today's conversation. Casey Bolsiga, Senior Portfolio Manager at Intrepid, and excited for today's conversation with Kristen and Andrea from Orangily. And before we kind of dive into everything, I'd like for you both to kind of just introduce yourself, give a quick introduction to who you are and what you do with your brand.
Kristen Patrick, co-founder of Orangily, and I head up marketing and sales.
Andrea Simpson, co-founder of Orangily. I am a little more on the back end. I manage some bookkeeping, some payroll, operations, and things like that.
To start, what ultimately led you to get into the alcohol-free space and open up a boutique in Carmel, Indiana?
Well, we always wanted to have our own store. And that's kind of been a lifelong dream. Just believers in shopping local. And it's something that we enjoy. And we always kind of had these fantasies of having our own store, but we were never quite sure what it would look like. So 2021, Andy and I both fully committed to an alcohol-free lifestyle. And we're open that it didn't happen overnight, that it took years for both of us, but 2021 was the year where we both went 100% in. And Casey, I don't know if if there's anyone in your orbit, your family, your friends, who's given up alcohol. Yeah. But you know that it becomes almost like your personality, where it's like you become a believer. Because a lot of people, like our shared friend Kylie, who also no longer participates in alcohol, a lot of us believe that you really level up in terms of productivity, sleep, health. Opens a lot of doors. And so where I'm going with this is because Andy and I were such believers, we knew we wanted a project, something to kind of like share our passion around this topic of choosing an alcohol-free lifestyle. So we had stumbled across a magazine article in January of 2022 about this emergence of alcohol-free bottle shops. There was one in Manhattan called Spirited Away and one in Charleston, South Carolina called Sachet. And we were intrigued. And I love the idea that magazines are part of this story because we both are magazine junkies. I think we get that from our mom and grandma, but we love magazines. And so, I showed it to Andy. I thought, hey, this is interesting. And Andy, credit to my sister, my business partner, she's a true visionary. She's always had the ability to look into the future and see where society's going, cultural shifts, media, fashion, food, beverage in this case. But she instantly saw it and was like, we're doing it. So it was a magazine article. And so then the idea that here was this opportunity around something we were really passionate about, an alcohol-free lifestyle, but also potentially fulfilling this dream of having our own store.
Love it. And Andy, how did you take that and kind of pursue more of the business side of it, right? Because the idea is great, but you have to make money, right, to support it. So what seems like an emerging category at that time and maybe a non-traditional space that maybe not everyone saw as an opportunity. What did you see from the market in terms of demand or ultimately that led you to open the shop?
Sure. Well, we certainly did our due diligence. Kristen and I are rule followers. We love a good protocol. We like to check all the boxes. So we met with different advisors and the Small Business Administration, and it just wasn't hard to see which way the wind was blowing. And this was really, you could just tell there's so much energy and so much excitement behind this movement. And there's so many new products that come out all the time that it was really sort of easy to put together a business plan. Now, Chris and I, like she said, we were such believers in this concept. We were a little taken back that it was a little hard to get a commercial space, and it was a little hard to convince other people because we had just experienced all of the benefits of this firsthand. So putting together the business piece, getting the real estate, and just starting to make orders was really exciting, and we really believed in it. And when we had our opening day and so many people came out and so many people already understood it in our community and were excited about it, then we really knew we were onto something. And
so you had the idea, the business plan, but of course you need funds, right, in order to get going. Given let's say the uniqueness of what you were doing, did you find it difficult to access funds, or what did that look like to start from a funding perspective to get things off the ground?
We just started with a small amount, each of us pooling our savings. And like Andy said, it wasn't until that opening weekend we're like, okay, I think we're onto something. I think this is going to work out okay. But then, when we realized the demand was there and keeping up, and then, supplying, as more brands are entering the marketplace and customers are asking for them, and figuring out how to increase our presence, is like, okay, now we need to think bigger about funding and expanding. We we launched our website July of 2022, and then we opened our first brick and mortar store in August of 2022.
That's awesome. And so what has kind of that growth been like since then, since that original opening? How have you kind of gotten to this point now?
Since August of 2022, we've opened a second retail location, and last month we opened our third retail location.
Congratulations.
So we've been slowly and steadily growing. Something that we decided very early on was to be cashless. So Kristen and I both come from the tech world as a professional background, and we utilized Shopify. Shopify can get you so much data about sales, cost of goods sold, your inventory, your customers. And we were doing so well from the very beginning that Shopify was able to, they sought us out for saying, hey, would you like a small business loan? And so we did a couple rounds through Shopify just because the data was there. We've had such a good experience with that tech. We felt confident growing in very small increments, taking small amounts and paying it off.
Yep.
I guess I just want to give another shout out for Shopify, because we are Shopify advocates, because I think a fear when opening a small business is this idea that you're going to be creating all these accounts and using all these third-party tools and using all these services, and those monthly fees stack on top of each other, and then not to mention 87 different usernames and passwords.
Yep.
So the idea that Shopify was this unified platform that was going to be our website, it was going to take care of delivery, pickup orders, our blog, our newsletter marketing, in addition to our point of sale, was very appealing. And what Andy's saying is that, the reporting feature is astounding on Shopify.
Truly.
Really like a data play. It's crazy the amount of data they have access to.
It's amazing. So it's no wonder that they're like, hey, we can see your sales data. We see that you're going to be good for this. So they were, the first couple rounds kind of dipping our toe in lending. Was Shopify Capital.
That's awesome. And I know Shopify is an example. There's other examples where it's your QuickBooks or whoever your accounting software is with, where we encounter a lot of clients. That's their first access to capital. That's their first option when it comes to any type of non-dilutive or essentially revenue-based financing, because that's kind of at the essence what that is. So you started with some of that capital from Shopify. Obviously, they were integrated in everything else. Did you encounter a point where, maybe there was still an opportunity for growth, but being a cashless business, right, from the digital perspective is different than being a cash generating business, right? We're talking about two totally different things here. So was there something that you saw as, hey, we can grow and we have this path forward, but we can't do it with the current Shopify capital, or even with just some of the options that you guys had at that point?
I think so. I think it took us a while to accept that first Shopify capital loan, because we are two Midwestern girls. I know. And we are so traditional. I mean, we've got our skill sets, but finance is not one of them. And we were really kind of bootstrapping and just making it work and hesitant to take that first round. And that felt very scary to us.
Yeah. And I'll just add on that, because I think, so much about our financial beliefs, and you probably deal with this all the time with clients. It's your part of your DNA, like your fabric, and it's handed down from your generations ahead of you.
Yeah.
And we come from, both our parents come from farming families. We're very financially conservative. So the idea of taking a loan was terrifying. Even at Shopify, even as easy as that process was,
You're
it was
reading
terrifying.
everything single term, being like, what is this? What is this? I want to make sure I'm not signing my life away or something like
terrifying.
that. Yeah. And so then as you kind of thought through that, because that's something I've learned working in this role, helping business owners access financing, right? Is that maybe financial literacy is the appropriate term? Maybe not. There is just different level of comfort, and there's different knowledge in, kind of the debt space, if you will. But something that always kind of resonated with me, and I spent a lot of time working with more of the traditional venture-backed companies, is if you look at it for almost a century or longer, businesses have been growing with debt. Even back in the day when they were bartering and trading and all of that, a lot of that was debt. The term underwriter comes from writing your name underneath someone else's debt and assuming that. So it's interesting to hear kind of your perspective of how, your upbringing and even just going back to the family being farmers played such a role in that. But then at the same time, there's this entrepreneurial aspect that's kind of driving you. Was there like a moment of like, aha, light bulb went off of saying, hey, you know what, we're going to pursue kind of our dream from a business perspective and kind of get more comfortable with the aspect of debt?
Okay. Well, I think I cut Andy off a moment ago, but I think one of the catalysts for saying, okay, we've got to do this is we had established this track of moving a lot of product. Mm-hmm. Our volume was pretty impressive, especially in some specific product. And so what was happening was brands were approaching us saying, how do you feel about distributing for Indiana or, Indianapolis area? And we're like, whoa, okay, hold on. Because
distributing, right?
So
not just retailing.
So doing business to business sales, which is an honor to be asked, but then the investment involved of, okay, well then we're committing to very large quantities, pallets. And then it's like, okay, but we want to, because we want to seize those opportunities. So that's really, I think, Andy can add to, but that's also what pushed us toward the loans.
Right. I mean, I do want to clarify that we felt intimidated by the debt space, but also we're not risk averse at all. I mean, we were just excited.
We just talked through the risk that you guys took,
We're so excited to grow, and the margins are very small in the NA bottle shop space. Yeah. So we're looking for ways to diversify, and the distribution was such a fun concept or an idea. So to take that on and to get more comfortable, and then to have this conversation with Kylie from Odyssey Resilience, who introduced us to you, and even just, I feel it's night and day, even 6 months ago, of like being comfortable about the growth and really opening up to being like, okay, what if we had a lot more? What could we do now? What are the next steps? And just allowing myself to be like, that's comfortable, that's doable, that's not so far out of reach. This is how businesses do it all the time. So I think that's something that you've introduced us to, where it's like, okay, we can do this.
Yeah. And what were some of those, I guess, unknowns when it came to, the Shopify one is so easy because it's kind of brought to you directly. And we see that with some of those other providers that I mentioned. But what was kind of some of the unknowns that you encountered that made, our conversation when we first have it kind of maybe set you on a different path than you originally had?
Personally, I had never let myself consider thinking about a larger amount.
Okay.
It seemed scary to me for all the reasons that we talked about. But how am I going to pay it off? How is this going to reflect on my personal finances? What are the repercussions if something goes terribly wrong? I had not allowed myself to dream that big, and I just didn't know that this was sort of the way of doing business. So all of the reasons, as mentioned before, but the more comfortable I am about it, the more I get educated on it. I just feel like, we could do a lot of things.
Anything for you?
I think, getting started with Intrepid, it was like, I guess when I hear SBA, I just hear like reams of paperwork. Or like, I feel like, I don't know, maybe.
Yes and no, it's not all physical paper now, but sometimes it is.
That's
sometimes
what I pictured. I pictured
paper.
sitting in a room and like signing 1 million documents, which, like Andy said earlier, we're very techie people. So something that we were so like pleasantly surprised or taken back with was that the application process was so streamlined and efficient.
What's funny is that we had just come off the 6-month process of getting certified as a women's business enterprise with the city of Indianapolis, which was so much paperwork and so much that we had to submit.
Reams of paper.
that when it came time to apply for the SBA loan, it was like, oh, this is it. I mean, it really was like probably about 25 minutes.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned efficiency, and that's something I always think of because there is this kind of, I don't know what I don't know, right? And that's what I've learned working in the commercial lending space from just the different types of lenders out there, the different types of providers out there. I like to say that there are a lot of bad actors in the space. And not that anyone who's listening or watching to this has to believe me, right? But something that we've kind of discovered is just this level of transparency, right? Of just, hey, in an industry that should be transparent because we're gonna see it, right? We're gonna see financials. We're gonna know the good, the bad, the ugly. That's something that I think has really started to become more prevalent in our industry in the non-dilutive space, right? And the nice thing about an SBA loan, because it's a banking product that is regulated by the Small Business Administration, is there is that level of transparency, right? But as I often say, when you're talking about banks and the government, two slower moving entities, right? It can take time. And that's where having, someone like Intrepid or even someone like the provider that you all worked with at the end of the day for the SBA loan, having someone that understands that, knows the process, can make it simple, and drawing back to your comment about tech, utilizes technology, but also utilizes people in the right place. We've kind of found that seems to be a little bit of the secret sauce when it comes to transparency, technology, and obviously having people involved in the process. I know you had kind of looked at some other options. We had discussed other options before we kind of landed on the SBA. When you started to learn more about the SBA and really start that process, was there anything that made you feel like, oh, this is right for us? This is right for us to move forward with this, take this on, to your point, Andy, a larger amount, right? Which maybe takes your breath away a little bit more when you think of it. But was there anything that you were like, okay, now I know that this is right and this is our right move. Let's push forward to the closing.
I think it was like when we saw what our monthly payment would be like, yeah, we can do that. Okay, okay, let's go. Where do we sign? We're in.
Yeah, you knew it was
doable.
Doable, right? You knew it allowed you to not just sustain, right, but continue to grow, to get the inventory that was needed from the distribution perspective, to have maybe some additional funds to help promote opening up that third location and different factors like that. Let's shift a little bit more to now, right? And what has happened since that, because it's been some time since you've closed on that loan. You'd mentioned you recently opened up that third location. How has all of this and everything that we've talked about kind of helped put you on this next phase of growth for your company?
I think it's been transformative in my mindset, where I just felt very safe and that we have these low margins and we're very, very careful. But I think just the way that I think has expanded because
some validation.
Yeah. The third store is off and running. It's a great location. I'm so happy we found it. And just being able to breathe, being able to think bigger. What are we going to do next? Honestly, I think for me, it's more internal than anything.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have envisioned that, but I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, the SBA loan allowed us with all kind of the expenses that came along with opening a third shop. Mm-hmm. Again, still doing it on a budget, but the expenses associated with that. And, people say, well, how did you decide the neighborhood? And I was like, customers kept asking for it. And
yeah,
like,
they did.
I do, and it's like
we didn't even have to do like a true research project because we just had people that are like, I'm driving from here, here,
And I was like, then I feel like such an amateur, like, oh God, it's like the equivalent of throwing a dart in a dartboard. But it's like, well, no. I mean, we had the data of like, this is where we're driving a couple times a week to make deliveries. These are where customers are consistently coming to us, to our retail shops to buy. This is where people are telling us weekly they want us to open.
Yeah.
We did a couple informal, surveys, but I guess, and again, I always feel silly saying, well, people asked us to.
Yeah.
But then it's like, well, then, but what is the answer? I mean, that's entrepreneurship. There are no knowns, and so much of this work is from your gut or your intuition.
Trust your gut.
Trust your gut. And I admit, I was sort of a wreck leading up to that South Broadway opening, that third store opening. But that opening day, I was like, okay, we're gonna be okay. This location's gonna be just fine.
When you told me the location, I was like, duh. I'm like, yeah, that's perfect, because I can't remember when we first started talking if you had an geographical area in mind for the third store, and then you told me, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's perfect. Why would you not do
that was affirming too, because we made the announcement that we were. Because that was part of us, putting our stake in the ground, our flag ground, saying, "Hey, we're going to be here.
We're not going anywhere."
So we made that announcement in December, and so all through the holidays and dry January, every single customer, we're opening in Indianapolis, right? And then we would tell people the location, and like, oh yeah, that's awesome.
They all had the same reaction as me, which is once again more of that validation,
yes.
right? That every business owner is looking for, right? That you can get with data, that you can get with all of these different things, but you can also just get from word of mouth, right? And
I want to give a shout out because the community, like the warm welcome from the neighborhood. So, community has been a big part of our story, even just here in Carmel, of just the, Hamilton County tourism and, the mayor's office and the One Zone Chamber of Commerce. The support has been tremendous. And then now to open up in Indianapolis and have this incredibly warm welcome from the neighborhood and the surrounding merchants is touching. And it's like, okay, this feels right.
That's awesome. Well, congrats to both of you on all of your success so far. I know it's been a pleasure for me to get to know you. I'm very grateful to Kylie for introducing us. And I know we've already collaborated on one event, and we're looking to collaborate on more events in the future too, which has been great. So congrats on all your success so far. Kind of before we wrap up, I would love to know if you have, and why don't you both take a turn at this, if you have any advice to a business owner, an entrepreneur, someone who's maybe even still at the back of the napkin. What is your advice to them to keep going, keep moving forward, and maybe even any lessons that you all have encountered kind of throughout this process of entrepreneurship? What would you share with them?
Okay, well, first I'll do two. One is a recent lesson we learned is finding a bank that is going to partner with you.
That's great.
So we recently had to switch banks. But it has turned out to be this really beautiful thing because now we have this bank who is cheering us on.
That's so great.
Checking in with us, right?
Yes.
Who's doing what they can to celebrate our work. And that blew our minds to even think that was possible. Mm-hmm. So I think, one piece of just really concrete, solid advice would be be thoughtful in the bank you choose from the beginning.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
They're with you.
Yeah.
And then, we I think the theme from our conversation today is this idea of what's the worst that can happen, right? This kind of running through, okay, what's the worst case scenario? And can I live with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not so bad. So I think that's, I don't know, maybe that sounds kind of dark, but that's kind of, that's all. But in kind of the conversation that we come back to that keeps moving us forward, okay, well, here's the best, kind of the worst case scenario, but God, I really like that best case scenario.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you fall in love with the best case scenario, right, you're going to do whatever you can to get closer to that than necessarily the worst case.
And I'm sure there's differing schools of thought on, the whole business plan.
Yep.
We ended up kind of having a 1-pager or 2-pager, but looking back, it's almost laughable about how different or how off we were. But in some ways, if we had had a clearer picture, I don't know if we would have opened, right?
Yeah.
And so
overthink it,
right?
Yeah,
so
overanalyze. Nope, it doesn't make sense because of this. There's just one thing.
And I think we could have been paralyzed if we had gone too deep in the weeds and would have prevented us from moving forward. We now are in this position of where we have a lot of people reaching out to us about opening a bottle shop or similar business in different communities. Mm-hmm. And I hear them say all the time, I'm looking at this spreadsheet and I'm crunching these numbers and this doesn't make sense. And I want to be whoa, well, I can't say that we ever really did that. But, kind of just go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. What about you, Andy?
I guess I have two thoughts as well. The first one would just be information is power and knowledge is power. I think looking back, the one thing that I was kind of intimidated about was finance and how we're going to fund all this. And I think I put it off finding education about it until when we finally got in contact with you, we were at the right time that it made sense for us. And maybe if I had gotten in contact with you earlier, it wouldn't have been the time, but it would have been on my mind and it would have been on the roadmap, and I would have known the things that we would possibly get to do in the future. And I think that would have given me peace of mind. So I think, before I've always said, like, hey, if you don't know how to make a website, find someone who does. You don't need to know everything. It's always good to just find the missing link, find the weakest link. And for me, it was finance. And it's like, I just wish maybe I would have reached out earlier to educate myself and to not be intimidated, because I was kind of quiet about it.
Absolutely.
And then the second piece that is kind of part B to that is just the networking piece, because Kristen and I have met so many people, and just, you don't know where a conversation will lead, like a conversation with Kylie at Odyssey Resilience, which introduced us to you, just going to these events and the One Zone Chamber and the meeting people. A, you're going to meet so many amazing people in your community. B, just the osmotic tendency of just getting questions answered or getting directed to the right person. We pride ourselves in that people come in and they ask for a specific drink, and we will order that drink. We are just so customer centric, but also just in the community, meeting people, and you don't know what could lead to what. So I think that's been something that has been so fun for me in this business journey, is just meeting people in my community.
I love it. People, connections.
I lost count at times where I showed up to something, even though I didn't feel like it.
Yes.
And then later I'm like, thank goodness I did, because if I didn't, I would have never met this person.
Yeah.
I had this opportunity or had this big sale.
Yeah. And, I kind of think back to a little bit about what both of you said. One, it's the educational component, but ask someone, like in the example of, your banker, right? Ask your banker, hey, I would like to get some capital for this situation. Is that something you can help me out with, or do you know someone? Right. Because a lot of times that's where you're going to get the connection that actually makes the difference, right? And having the community, but then also the support. And I will say this from a fan, it's easy to cheer and root for you all, and having interacted with you and even just a shorter time frame, it's easy to want to support you all and to want to be part of what you're doing and want to be fans. So I think that's something that is in your corner as you continue to grow. Now, I know there are some big plans in the future. We're not going to talk about those right now. Maybe we'll save that for a part 2.
Let's do it.
But outside of some of that, as we kind of wrap up here, is there anything in particular that you are excited for Orangily in 2025 that you can talk about?
I think just keep meeting new people.
Yeah.
Keep meeting new people, and that
expanding, growing the brand, right? Yeah. Get in front of people. And so if you want to get in touch with Chris or Andrea, we'll be sure to link some information in this interview about how to do that. And then what is the best way? You're both on LinkedIn, right? And the website is
Orangily.com. So ORANGILY.com.
And you can order online?
For pickup.
For pickup.
So if you're in Central Indiana, do pickup orders.
Order online for pickup in one of the stores, which is awesome. Well, thank you both so much for this time and conversation. I know that I've had an absolute blast working with you and putting some of this together, and I know we're going to do more events together as well. So excited to see you guys continue to grow.
I love it. Thanks for your support.
The future is NA.
This has been fun.
Absolutely.
Yes.